21. Mendel had awakened with a feeling that someone had just called his name. At first, he thought it his brother, and that made him stand up and look around. But when Mendel saw no sign of old Dyson, his suspicions grew. Then, the voice called to him again. This way. It beckoned him. This way. Somehow he knew exactly which direction to go. Not for a moment did Mendel hesitate. He had finally gone beyond fear of his situation. Fascination commanded him now. Making certain that no one observed him, he slipped into the jungle. Curiously, Mendel felt more at home here than he ever had back in Sarum. It was as if this was a cherished place that old Dyson's brother had forgotten until now. Treading with nimbleness generally absent, Mendel dove deeper into the jungle. The voice kept urging him on, telling him where to turn. He followed its guidance with the utmost trust. The insects kept their distance from him, just as they had since shortly after he and his companions had entered the lush land. They had quickly sensed the change in him, the otherness that Mendel was only just beginning to understand. Despite the dark, he found it not at all difficult to see. Things were shadowed, true, but his vision was sharper than ever. Indeed, in some ways, Mendel could see better than he did even during the day. His surroundings had more definition, more distinction. Turn, turn, the voice commanded. Mendel obeyed, took several steps, then waited. But the voice gave him no more instructions. Frowning, he took one more step, and suddenly, in front of him stood a towering, glittering obelisk untouched by the incessant growth. It stood more than twice as tall as Mendel, and was made of what he suspected was obsidian. Mendel had admired samples of the black stone that Cyrus had bought from a merchant and felt that what stood before him could be nothing else. Yet what drew his attention most was not the pointed obelisk itself, but what was carved on each of its faces. More words in the ancient script. They ran from the top to the bottom, and as he eyed them, it almost seemed as they glowed faintly. Mendel mouthed them as best as he could, recognizing each symbol to have some crude notion of what others might mean. As he read, his understanding grew. Becoming excited, he pored over the first face again and again. Each time the message proved clearer. Again and again he touched it. His expression transformed into that akin to a child, for what was written there filled him with awe. And so Mendel kept reading. Old Dyson stared in disbelief at the man before him. Romus, the criminal. Romus, the converted. What are you doing here? Old Dyson demanded. His gaze flickered to the few faces partially visible around them. He recognized most. They were all from Partha. When you were found missing, Holy One, we feared the worst, especially after how it was for poor Master Ethon and his boy. Nicodemus, he's a good tracker, and some of the others too. They took off as soon as we could after you. Romus grinned. But you're all right. You shouldn't have followed, Old Dyson reprimanded the men. You endanger yourselves. And what of your families? All of us came willingly, someone else said. And our families are all with us, of course. We'd not abandon them. Isn't that right? There was a chorus of "Aye!" For the first time, old Dyson noticed that some of the figures toward the back of the dark throng were of slighter builds. Several were fairly short. He had not thought of them as women or, for that matter, children. But why bring their families with them on such a desperate pursuit? A sick feeling swelled up in him. Why are all you here, Romus? Why, to learn from you, Holy One, to follow your path wherever it takes you. Others backed up his declaration. Don't call me that, old Dyson blurted. Never that. Romus bowed his head. Very sorry, Master Old Dyson. I'd forgotten, yes. Gritting his teeth, old Dyson continued. You uprooted your families to follow me? Are you mad? Almost as one, they shook their heads. He eyed the townsfolk, aware that his fury barely touched them. They were utterly insane, but could not see that fact. But as it became apparent that he had nothing more to teach them, he would surely come to their senses. Then it would be they who would become outraged with him. Manon's still concerned old Dyson, but he needed to deal with this band first. How many are there of you, Romus? A good quarter of Parthos stands around you, Master Old Dyson, and others but await word of our success before they join us. The sick feeling swelled 100-fold. Barely able to think, old Dyson whirled back toward the camp. Follow me. Always, murmured Romus. Already regretting his choice of words, the son of Demete stalked away. Behind him came a massed shuffling of feet and the shaking of grass and branches. As he neared the edge of the camp, Achilleos, an arrow notched and ready to fire, stood sternly waiting. His face went through a contortion of emotions as he drank in what came in his friend's wake. What have you found out there, an army? The Parthans, or at least a good number of them. Achilleos looked from one newcomer to the next. Is there anyone left there? Too few. Old Dyson looked around. Where's Mandel? I assumed with you. I noticed him rise at one point, Serenthina piped up from near the fire. She eyed the two Parthans with wonder. I fell asleep again almost immediately, though. It was not what old Dyson wanted to hear. He's been gone for too long. I need to go back out and search for him. Leaning close, the archer whispered, Then why not use this bunch? I can only assume that they came after you, and from the looks of those admiring expressions, if you asked for them to hunt for your brother, they would. And half of them would get eaten, while the others would likely die of accidents or some disease. They understand nothing about the jungle. Nor do we, but we chose to come here nonetheless. As the two argued, more and more people flowed into the tiny site. The women and children became apparent now, they moving closest to the single fire. Some of the men came bearing wood, which they used to build other fires for their numbers which continued to grow. You're certain it's only a part of the town? Achilleos asked. For now. Old Dyson spotted Bartha and her son. The woman smiled, then leaned down to point out him to her dear child. The boy waved merrily. Old Dyson could not help but wave back, but his heart grew heavier. Their faith was based on lies. Romus joined him again. There was absolutely none of the distrust and unsavoriness of the man old Dyson had first viewed from a distance in Parthos Square. Master Old Dyson, Would it be permissible to have them start cooking meals and clearing more ground? You have food? He prayed that they did not somehow expect him to magically supply them with anything. Oh, yes, we knew that we might have to travel some distance to catch up to you. There are horses laden with packs just coming up now. Sure enough, in addition to the throng of people, more than a score of heavily encumbered mounts were already in sight. Old Dyson could scarcely believe what he was seeing. How could such a large party have organized so quickly, much less followed him so expertly? And they all expect the world from you, came the thought. They all expect you to teach them to become more powerful than the mage clans. The immensity of what he was supposed to do, especially in light of the fact that he was utterly beyond him, struck old Dyson so hard that he turned from the others without another word and stalked off into the jungle. He did not go far, naturally, but just enough to find some peace, or at least attempt to. Even alone, old Dyson could not escape his feelings of failure, of complete shame. They ate away at him with an intensity he had not experienced previously. In his mind, he heard the voices speaking so reverently about him, saw again the odd faces, both young and old. Bartha's son came unbidden to his memory, the boy and his mother seeking him as some mythic healer, when the truth was that it had been a demoness who had given the child a new life. Lila, how she would have laughed at his situation. In fact, it was very likely that she watched from somewhere, enjoying his torment and the eventual chaos when the Parthens discovered the awful truth about him. Lila called him nothing, and he was seeing the truth of her words more and more with each passing moment. Perhaps the temptress had even slightly urged the townsfolk to this foolish trick, whispering in their ears that they had to follow. That could explain their swift and certain path. How better to ensure the greatest steps to his downfall than to bring all the elements together herself? Once more he had underestimated her retribution. "You've got what you want!" Old Dyson shouted at the darkness. "Now leave me be!" No one responded, of course. He had not suspected it. She wanted him completely humiliated, perhaps even slain. If old Dyson was torn apart by his enraged followers, Lila would simply find herself a new puppet. You thought that you would bring down the masters of Sanctuary. You thought that the triune in the Cathedral of Light would fall, so that you could finally rid yourself of the demons of your past. Old Dyson shuddered, thinking how he had even failed anew his lost loved ones. Their memories would be tainted by his debacle. When people recalled his family, it would be with curses and dark thoughts. "I only wanted to help," the son of Domeets muttered. "Only wanted things to make sense." To his ever-distraught mind, the calls of the jungle's nocturnal denizens began to sound like mocking laughter. Old Dyson almost turned and headed back to the camp, but then recalled how he would find. He looked at the shadowed surroundings, seeking some escape. There is always the triune. At first, the thought startled old Dyson, but as he considered it, it made some sense. Truly, before it had been the suggestion of Malik, But now old Dyson considered what would happen if he willingly walked into the main temple and gave himself over to them. There would be no more running. Parthens would initially grow angry when they discovered his duplicity, and when they found they would feel justice had only been served. Old Dyson did not care what happened to himself. At the point only that no one else would be affected anymore. Perhaps it would even be best to lead the Parthens to the temple too. Let them see the truth there for themselves. Old Dyson grimaced. It said something for his state of mind that he had thought of such an outrageous thing for even a moment. Old Dyson shook his head, trying to clear it. What he chose to do concerning himself was one thing, but he would not lead the Parthens through any more deceit, and he would certainly not lead them to the temple. Yet, if old Dyson intended to cut off all ties with those following him, it behooved him to do so as quickly as possible. However, once he returned to the camp, they would be with him, waking and sleeping. It would almost be better, old Dyson thought, if he just never returned at all. Never returned at all. Perhaps this time it would work. His feet began moving even before his mind registered the action. Old Dyson shoved aside the thick branches, pushing as fast as he could through the jungle. On the one hand, he knew that his abrupt flight was even more insane than the one from Partha, but on the other, it would catch everyone aware. They would have no idea where to look, where to go. He defied their best trackers, the Chilios included, to keep on his heels in this thick vegetation. But as old Dyson tore his way through the night, he began to wonder how far he would get without a mount. A horse could at least barge through the jungle easier, and surely there would be emptier trails ahead where a rider could quickly pick up the pace. If only he had thought of taking one with him. But that was something well beyond hope now. Unable to do anything else, and feeling as if it all depended on him, running and running until he could run no more, old Dyson moved blindly through the jungle. Each moment he expected shouts to arise and pursuit to begin. A large form moved through the vegetation just ahead. Old Dyson tried to slow, but the ground was soft and moist and his footing failed. He tumbled forward, landing on his face. There was a heavy snort. A muzzle prodded his shoulder. Wiping dirt from his eyes, old Dyson beheld a towering white horse. Loose reins dangled under the thick neck. The animal was also saddled, and old Dyson could only surmise that this was a Parthen steed lost during the trek through the jungle. Seizing the reins, he murmured to the horse, reassuring that it was no danger. The mount actually seemed grateful to have him near. The unknown landscape, no doubt, putting it ill at ease. Thanking his good fortune, old Dyson started to mount. "No! Keep away from it!" Startled by the voice, his foot slipped free. The horse snorted violently, as if furious at the interruption. It moved away from the direction of the collar, pulling old Dyson, who still gripped the reins, with him. "Easy! Easy!" Forcing the animal to a halt, old Dyson turned to face the one who had spoken. The face was so pale that even the dark jungle could make out its detail. The figure strode toward him with urgency, but also a smooth movement that seemed right at home in their surroundings. Mandel? Somehow old Dyson could not be certain that he was actually seeing his brother. This was Mandel, but somehow it was not. Old Dyson? Mandelin's voice was low and so steady again that his older sibling wondered if what he saw was truth or illusion. Old Addison, keep away from that creature. It is not what it seems. The only creature near him was the horse, which to old Addison's eyes and hand was certainly what it seemed. He could not entirely say the same for the figure approaching him. Memories of the foul work of Malik returned. "Keep back!" he demanded of Madeline. "Keep back!" "Old Addison, it is me." "I don't know that." His head pounded.
It cannot be him. It cannot be Madeline. A demon, perhaps. Let him come closer. The knife. Use the knife when he is in range.
"Do not listen to him," the apostle Madeline quietly said. "I don't understand what he tells you, but I know it to be vile." Old Addison frowned. The pounding was becoming worse with each beat of his heart. Who are you talking about?" "Yes, you cannot see him as he truly is. He leans at your shoulder, murmuring like a lover,
Use the
but giving
knife.
only hate.
Use the
I think
knife.
he knows her, old Dyson, for he has a look to him akin to her. Her. In old Dyson's mind, that could only mean one person. Lila? That is what you call her, yes. Do you also remember how you finally saw her?" Old Dyson had once believed that he could never forget Lila's true form, but now, no matter how hard he tried to summon it, he could not. No, keep away from me! Old Dyson, it is me, your brother Mendlin. Look closely. See my eyes. Remember all we've been through? Remember the pain and suffering of the plague as our father, mother, and our brothers and sisters were eaten away by it? As the figure spoke, his tone changed. It remained low and overall steady, but there were hints of deep pain that mirrored what lay within old Dyson's own soul. He knew that then this had to be his brother, not some demon wearing Mendelin's flesh. They made him release the reins, or at least old Dyson tried to release them. His fingers would not uncurl. In fact, if anything, they tightened their grip, defying his will. The white sneeze snorted, then renewed its effort to pull him away from Mendelin. His brother uttered something unintelligible. The horse suddenly reared, shrieking as no earthly animal could. Its form twisted in a manner that should have snapped a spine in half, yet the creature seemed more furious than pained. "Pull free now, old Dyson! Lean against the reins and pull with all your will!" Old Dyson immediately obeyed. His one hand continued to clutch the reins, even as the enraged horse twisted as if made of soft red dough. Its orbs blazed red and no longer had pupils. The mane coursing down its neck and over its shoulders had a thorny cast to it now. Despite its girth, the creature stood upon its hind legs, as if more accustomed to moving in that fashion. Still his fingers would not free themselves. Old Dyson tugged as hard as he could, using his strength to its utmost. Then something Mendelin had said came back to him. The younger brother had used the word will, not strength. Mendelin had been so specific. Relaxing slightly, old Dyson focused on wanting to be separate from the reins. He concentrated on his fingers, seeking control. His grip loosened. He immediately whirled, his hand flinging free. As it did, the beast next to him lost all semblance of a horse. It reshaped, growing slightly smaller. The demonic aspects also transformed, at least to a point, the thorns becoming hair and the body more human. Before him now stood a tall, kindly figure with flowing gray hair and a trim beard. As he smiled at old Dyson, he extended his arms.
You have proven very worthy, my son. Come and accept my blessings for your stalwart efforts.
What? Who are you?
Why, I'm the Primus, of course.
The smile dazzled.
But you may call me Lucian.
Old Dyson looked aghast. Primus! Lucian! The figure nodded.
Yes, Lucian. And I understand that the demoness Lilith has been spreading false witness concerning me.
Lilith? You mean Lila?
Lilith is her true name. She is the mother of the deceit, the mistress of betrayal. You are indeed strong for having survived against her, my son.
From behind old Dyson, Menlin said, beware, brother. False images are legion where this one is concerned. Before old Dyson could respond, the Primus calmly replied,
Does that actually sound like Menlin? No. Have you not noticed the dark changes in him of late? There are more demons in the world than merely Lilith, my son. And one of them has cast a shadow over your sibling.
old Dyson looked back. Mandel? I am still me. What exactly that meant, old Dyson did not know. He considered all that he had seen happen to his brother. Mandel had definitely changed, but was it for good or ill?
I do not know you, demon.
Lucian remarked, sounding much more like a protective uncle to old Dyson.
But your intent is clear. You would work at the soul of this worthy one, burrow into it through one of those nearest and dearest to him. That cannot be permitted. He is under my protection.
Protection? Mandolin returned. As the high priest, Malik sought to protect him with the spells of Skinflang and his bloodthirsty Morlu?
Exactly. Malik's. I regret his actions immensely. I was unaware that one so close to me had been seduced by demons. I had sent him to invite Uldias and Uldiam to visit the temple as my guest, to be honored, nothing more.
He considered further.
The Morlu are an abominable creation by what is called the Cathedral of Light, not the Trian. It must be from there that came a demon who turned poor Malik.
There was something about the Primus that made old Dyson want to believe him, yet bits of what he said did not sound true. The only demon here stands before us, old Dyson, Mendelin insisted, stepping between his brother and Lucian. You must believe. The master of the Triune shook his head.
His words are strong, embellished as they are by sorcery. For your sake, I fear I must remove the taint. I'm sorry for your loss, dear old Dyson, but there is no choice.
It took old Dyson a moment to understand. When he did, he reached out in sudden panic. No! Mendelin! A circle of silver light formed around the Primus, then immediately burst forth. It struck where Mendelin had been standing, and suddenly old Dyson's brother was no longer there. Both old Dyson and Lucian eyed the empty spot. Then the Primus remarked,
Fear for your brother, old Dyson. The demon is powerful. It has taken him away from here. It would be best if we joined together, fought him side by side.
No. Old Dyson was not quite certain what was going on with Mandolin, but he refused to believe that his brother had become some vessel for evil. He also now refused to believe much of what the Primus had told him concerning Malik. The priest had been too adamant when it came to speaking about his master. Malik had been a loyal follower, not a betrayer of the Primus. No. Leave me alone.
Dear brother Oldison.
Something pressed against Aldison's brain. Gritting his teeth, he stepped back from the glistening figure. Leave me alone. I want nothing of you or the Cathedral of Light. Nothing at all. He spun from Lucian. Old Dyson was not certain just where he headed, but he knew somehow that he needed to be away quickly. There was a flaring of light behind him, as he recalled had happened just before Mandolin's odd vanishing. Even as old Dyson ran, he steeled himself for the inevitable. The force that struck him was oddly cold. He felt as if his body was twisted inside out. His legs, his arms refused to function. Both the muscle and bone seemingly turned to jelly. Old Dyson collapsed against a tree, then tumbled to the jungle floor.
Perhaps you are actually nothing, as my sister said.
Lucian commented clinically.
Perhaps there is nothing to old Dyson, old Diamond.
A tingling surrounded the barely conscious old Dyson. The ground beneath him suddenly grew distant. Vaguely, the son of the Meads realized that he was floating several feet above it.
I shall have to test you and retest you to be certain. Let the Morlu play with you too. They tend to bring out the desire for survival, which should in turn bring out the power of the Nephilim, if it is truly stirring within you.
There is nothing, old Dyson guessed. I am no threat to you.
You never were human. I am Lucian, son of Mephisto, the greatest of the primevals. Blood of my kind may flow through your veins, but it is watered down with the pure emptiness of Anarius' ilk.
Old Dyson's view shifted as he floated toward his captor. Lucian still wore the semblance of the Primus, but old Dyson very much believed that the horrific glances he had seen during the earlier transformation had been nearly to the truth. What had Lucian said of Lila? Or Lilith? That she was his sister?
Yes, test you and retest you so that there is...
The demon repeated. He smiled, and although his face was yet human, the sharp teeth and forked tongue were not.
And if you fail, then I will just feed you to the Morlu, still alive, of course.
And although Lucian continued to smile, old Dyson knew that he was not in any way jesting.